The most interesting guests. The coolest conversations. Keep watching episodes of the Grizzly Podcast, hosted by Irvin Scott. Follow the Grizzly Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and many more apps to have our episodes delivered right to your iPhone, Android, or any other device whenever they're released. Can't get enough of the Grizzly Podcast? Stay up to date with all our latest news, events, and behind-the-scenes footage by visiting grizzlypodcast.com.
So what does it mean to be on your Grizzly? It means hard work, dedication, and it means progress beyond your Grizzly. Hard work, dedication, and progress.
I'm on my Grizzly, y'all. I'm on my Grizzly. I'm on my Grizzly, y'all. I'm on my Grizzly. I'm on my Grizzly, y'all. I'm on my Grizzly. And if you're busy making moves, say it with me. I'm on my Grizzly, y'all. I'm on my Grizzly. I'm on my Grizzly, y'all. I'm on my Grizzly. I'm on my Grizzly, y'all. I'm on my Grizzly. And if you're busy making moves, say it with me.
Coming to you from the City of Angels, this is the Grizzly Podcast, hosted by Irvin Scott.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Grizzly Podcast. I am your host, Irvin Scott, and today I am joined by a special guest. She is an actress, a writer, an artist, and a director, best known for her role as Zora Lancaster on Disney Channel's Sonny With A Chance and its spinoff So Random. She's also known for her role as Heather Wilmore on NBC's AP Bio. She's also the co-owner of Watch the Footage Productions. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today, Allisyn Snyder.
Oh, thank you so much for that intro. Really appreciate it. And I'm happy to be here.
Hey, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. I want to say I am so excited for you to be on this show because you've been on your grind for quite some time. And, because this is the Grizzly Podcast, this is what we do. We take people such as yourself who are constantly grinding, constantly hustling, basically gets the business done. So you're somebody who I feel embodies what we do on this show. So again, thank you so much for joining us. How are things going with you?
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. I've definitely been taking the last couple of years to really evaluate my time management because I have always been, on the grind, which can be very good and very productive, but it can also burn you out pretty fast. And then that halts all productivity. So I've been doing a much better job lately of finding that, life-work balance that really works for me. I now have time to produce movies and garden, and I've been getting into composting, and it's great. So life is good.
And it seems like it really is going well because you're so positive. You seem very happy. And we're going to talk about everything that you're working on today. So let's take them back. Because for people that are listening and watching right now that may not be familiar with your career, let's have them get to know you a little bit more. So,
oh gosh. Oh, we're about to go for a throwback.
Throwback it is. Let's take them back. Allisyn, you were born in Glendale, California. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Born and raised in Los Angeles. I'm one of the few non-transplants. It's funny because for me, waves of people come in and out of Los Angeles, trying to make it in this industry. And, when people have a hard year or a hard month and they're like, you know what, maybe I should just give it all up, go back home. I'm already home. There's nowhere else for me to go. So I just keep on doing it.
I love it. And, and that's the good thing about LA because LA is just filled with so much culture. I can see why people like to come out here. And it's not just for like acting or for music purposes. I mean, I think just sometimes the weather itself is just kind of great. I mean, it's really hot right now, but normally the weather's like fine and it's groovy.
Funny enough, everyone always talks about the weather in California being such a perk. And that's actually probably the only reason I would ever leave California if I ever did in the future. I want seasons at some point. I have that reverse, everybody gets depression when it rains. I have it the opposite. I love going for a long walk in the rain and just being outside and feeling the cold, feeling the seasons, getting out my sweaters. And yeah, Los Angeles is the right place to meet people. And if you want to be able to plan a shoot on any day and not get rained out, LA is the spot. I definitely know why Hollywood was based here because, I know we're going to back it up and talk about, early work, but just getting a little bit into producing. Whenever you're planning a shoot out of state, which we're working on a film right now that we're going to be shooting here in a few months, and we're filming it in Texas, and just dealing with the thunderstorms and trying to plan the schedule of our shoot around the fact that there are just thunderstorms and that's just not a thing that we get here makes me realize like, oh yeah, there's a reason that this industry started out here, but it got very expensive. So there's a reason that the industry is starting to branch out outside of Los Angeles as well.
You've accomplished so much in your career, and you're still very young, which is amazing because, again, no one can say that they've appeared in over 60 commercials, and you've been on television. You've appeared in movies with like very prominent actors. So I want to talk about how this whole thing came about, how your whole journey got started. So it goes back to the age of 4 years old. You were fascinated with theater at that age, and your parents enrolled you in acting school.
Yeah. So people often ask me if I knew that I wanted to get into acting or, where that passion came from. Honestly, I just liked being loud and dressing up in costumes and having fun with my friends. And so theater and making home movies were just right up my alley. I've always been a very creative person. My dad's always nurtured that in me. And, I wanted to be a pirate when I was little. I wanted to be an astronaut when I was little. And acting was kind of a way to be all of those things at the same time. And there's also not, there's acting classes when you're 4, but there's not astronaut classes and there's not pirate classes. So acting just happened to be the one that I could get into at that age. And especially growing up in LA made it really easy. My parents and we all just kind of stumbled into the entertainment industry. My dad is a composer and a musician. He grew up on the East Coast and then moved out here to LA for music, met my mom, and of course stayed because of my mom. They've been together for decades now and still going strong. They have a crazy origin story that shouldn't have worked, but somehow it did. And I have a tattoo based on it. I have the cross streets of Sunset Boulevard and LaBrea Avenue tattooed on my forearm because that's where they met. And my dad had his crazy 80s long rocker hair, and my mom was this, young blonde from California, and she was driving through Hollywood with her best friend, and they saw my dad and his bandmates walking down the street, and my mom's best friend was like, oh, you should ask those guys if they want to ride. And so she's like, rolls down the window, you boys want to ride? She introduced herself as Kit Kat, and she worked at Little Caesars Pizza, and the band, not making very much money, loved her because she would bring them the leftover pizza at the end of the day. And then, 9 months later, they eloped to Las Vegas on a motorcycle and got married, and definitely shouldn't have stayed together because that's a crazy story. But they always told me, they're like, it's a 1 in a million story, which means that we're that 1 in a million and you're not. So don't do that. It's a terrible idea. Every step along the way, it was a bad idea. Shouldn't have worked out, but it totally did. And yeah. So they're very flexible and very, that kind of bohemian style life is, where I came from.
For them to say, you know what, this is what she wants to do. Let's enroll her in an acting school and, let's do our best to encourage her to do what she wants to do and what she loves. So the fact that they did that for you is very cool because it eventually paid off. As I mentioned earlier, you appeared in over 60 commercials throughout your childhood. That's a pretty cool thing in itself. What does that feel like being a part of more than 60 commercials throughout your childhood?
It's interesting because I can be talking with friends about just about anything, any brand, and then bring up a commercial experience that I've had. with them. For instance, I was just on a road trip with my husband, Dylan Snyder, and our best buddy, Joey Luthman, who is the director of photography of our upcoming feature. We were location scouting throughout Texas and, grabbing road trip snacks, and one of them being Cheez-Its. And I, randomly brought up the Cheez-Its commercial that I had done as a child, and I pulled it up for them. And both Dylan and Joey had never seen it like after they had met me, but they had seen it before they had met me. And so they both had that like memory flood back to them of going, oh my gosh, I saw this commercial on TV. And like, now I recognize that it's you, but at the time I had no idea. So that's crazy to like see it and know that that was you. And I think that a lot of people would probably be shocked to go back and watch a lot of my old commercials. I was in a Got Milk commercial as a very small child. And I was on Friends as a kid. And there's a lot of TV appearances that I didn't really understand the gravity of, or I didn't understand how many people were truly watching. But it's, I have a little place in a bunch of people's childhoods and a bunch of people's memories.
Is there one in particular that stands out, or that you remember that just a commercial that you actually had a really great time on when you were working on it?
Yes, actually, I was in a commercial for a cable company, and they were advertising the fact that the time that you can schedule your cable guy to come is very flexible. And to sell that idea, there was basically these two neighbors having a conversation, and the one guy was saying, oh yeah, I'm so happy I was able to schedule this because I had my daughter's play last night, and oh gosh, if I had missed her play. And then it goes into this flashback or like kind of dreamy sequence of my character playing his daughter getting so heartbroken and upset that he doesn't come to my play that I run away from home. And so I got to climb out of a window, and I'm like running through the woods, and I meet this bear, and the bear ends up like taking care of me, and we form this relationship. So they had a giant animatronic bear that I got to like act with, and like they put strawberries inside of this fake fish because I'm a vegetarian, and also like they're not going to feed a child raw fish anyway. So I just remember thinking that was so cool to be like, oh yeah, strawberries can totally look like blood and guts. And just the amount that I learned on that set and just getting to work with a giant animatronic bear was I still have yet to, I think, be on a cooler shoot than that. That was so cool.
So definitely a commercial that was memorable, something that still stands out even after all these years. So after doing all those commercials, as you mentioned, you did make appearances on television, and one of your first television appearances, your role on the medical drama series Strong Medicine.
Yes, yeah. Those early years are a little bit fuzzy remembering the order of things because I was 4, 5, 6. But yeah, I do remember Strong Medicine. I remember that being a very, very early project and learning the differences between television sets and commercial sets. And also, I have a little bit of a, I'm working on my hospital phobia. And I don't know how much of it is necessarily from being on that set, or maybe if that set helped in any way. But yeah, I remember that set being a really interesting experience because hospitals was always something that I had been scared of. Or, you go to the hospital and you get shots. And so there's kind of this anxiety and this intensity surrounding it. But then to be there to work and like be on a set and to be pretending that I'm dying of cancer and I'm in a hospital bed, but I'm not, was just a really interesting experience to have when you're a very small child and like don't really understand what death or sickness or anything is.
A learning experience in itself. And eventually though, we got to see more from you, and you had mentioned Friends earlier. What was it like being a part of Friends and being around that cast?
Yeah, I mean, I was a child, so I wasn't really having conversations or interacting with the cast as, peers. I was more just stoked to be getting paid to throw bagels at a grown man. It wasn't even, I got to throw bagels at Matthew Perry, and Matthew Perry's this big star. It was just the excitement of other grown-ups coming up to me with a handful of bagels and saying, I want you to throw the bagels at that man. Me being like, all right, you got it. And I got him pretty hard in the eye one time, which I feel a little bit bad about, but it brought my child self so much joy, and they did use it for the edit.
That's so funny. But but I guess looking back now, right? Now that you're older and you see how much of an impact Friends had on the culture. What does it feel like just knowing that you were a part of a successful show such as Friends?
That's a really interesting question, and it's something that I've still been wrapping my head around. And it's nice to know that I've already made it in the history of the entertainment industry of I am a part of something that is never going to fully disappear. It is a staple of entertainment, whether you like the show or not. It's influenced so many things to come afterward, and people will always go back and rewatch it. People will always reference it. And to be a part of something that massive is unparalleled. It's really, really cool. The show is not necessarily aging super well as we become a little bit more of a PC culture. However, I still think for its time and for what it is, it's a very funny episode. I hadn't watched the show before I was on it. Because, obviously I was a very small child. I wouldn't have understood it. But then going back as a teenager and getting to rewatch it, experience it, and then seeing myself pop in with this little cameo was pretty surreal.
And that's amazing to hear because whether people watch that show or not, at least you'll always know that you'll always be a part of the Friends universe.
I know. Yeah, that's a nice way to put it. I hadn't really thought about being a part of the Friends universe. I like that.
That eventually led you to film roles. I know you were part of Meet Dave with Eddie Murphy. You were also a part of King of California with Michael Douglas. So the fact that you got to work on these two films or just, being around people such as Eddie Murphy or Michael Douglas, or at least just associated with these projects, what does that feel like? Because these are two very legendary figures in their own right as well.
Yeah, actually, both Meet Dave and King of California came into my life because I had worked with the directors already. And so that was a really fun, nice experience because I was already familiar with somebody who had a major role on the set. And so going into the set environments, I already knew it was going to be a fun time. Meet Dave was a fun little day experience. I only came in for that one classroom scene. And I remember I was drawing a picture of Shrek and Donkey in the little notebook because I always love to doodle anytime I'm playing a student and I'm in a classroom setting. I always start doodling in the little textbooks and notebooks that the props department gives me because I'm like, no real children are using this. It doesn't matter. I can draw all over it. Next actor that gets a hold of it might get a little kick out of it. But I was drawing Shrek and Donkey, and I remember Eddie Murphy at one point saw it over my shoulder and he's like, "Hey, that's pretty good." I'm like, "Oh, that's so cool." So that was a fun little moment for me that Eddie Murphy complimented my donkey drawing because that was such a big part of my childhood. So King of California was it was a fun experience because the movie is beautiful and I still think it's one of the best films I've ever been in. However, I remember being really sick on set. So I remember the actual experience itself being pretty difficult because I had a stomach flu on, I don't know if it was for the entirety of shooting, but at least on the last day, I remember my dad and I kind of keeping it a secret that I was sick because we just wanted to be professional and easy to work with and get through the day. And so I was keeping it, really quiet that I was sick and just running off to the bathroom between things, which, now post COVID, as we are creating new departments in the entertainment industry. It's no longer just a set medic to throw a Band-Aid on something. Now we have doctors on sets who are making sure that certain hygiene and, if somebody's sick, maybe they don't have to come in that day. Maybe we can work with them around that. So yeah, King of California is kind of a weird one for me because I really, really loved being on that set and I really, really love the end product. But at the time I was just battling this flu.
How long did it take for you to finally feel like yourself after all that?
Yeah, I was only on the set of King of California for a few days, and so the stomach flu didn't really last that long anyway. It was a pretty quick experience. It just that's one of the most difficult things about acting is that every time you book something big, it always seems to coincide with a health issue. And I think that it partially has to do with stress. You get a cold sore or a big blemish, or you get an eye infection, just something always happens on your big day. You get sick, you have a cold. I've I have so many episodes of Sonny With A Chance that, when I rewatch them, I can hear the stuffiness in my nose of having been sick that week. And that's I think the part that's the most upsetting to me is when the sickness or the infection or anything like that makes it into the final cut. It's like, if I can keep that from getting into the final cut, I'll tough it out through whatever. But if a little bit of that shows through in my performance, I'm always, like, universe, why didn't you let me be healthy that week?
Kudos to you for doing that as a kid, because again, I think we don't realize how severe things can be as a kid. But we're in the middle of just like doing something and we just want to just get it done anyway. But
yeah, it feels weird to accept the kudos because I don't think it was necessarily a good thing for my childhood to have to put all of my like internal feelings off to the side. I definitely think that's something that needs to change about the industry, of having more protections in place to protect the safety of both child and adult actors and the crew as well. I've been on some crazy sets that, aside from just having a flu on a set, ones where the set environment is what puts you in danger, or is what puts you in those painful situations. And so, yeah, I think there is a good amount of work ethic and powering through something, but I also think that the industry could get a little bit better about maybe creating some leeway or some room for actors to be able to take a sick day here and there.
I agree, definitely. And earlier you had mentioned Sonny With A Chance. So speaking of Sonny With A Chance, let's fast forward here.
Only 11 when I booked it.
After all these rows, you eventually landed the role of Zora in the Disney Channel hit series Sonny With A Chance with Demi Lovato, and eventually that turned into a spin-off series, which was so random, with our good friend Matthew Scott Montgomery and a few other people.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk about Sonny With A Chance. What was it like being a part of that show and getting a chance to work with Demi Lovato as well?
Absolutely. So Sonny With A Chance was the first thing that I booked that my friends and I could watch. And it was the first thing where I really started to grow a child audience and a much bigger audience. Up until that point, my parents' friends would come up to me and say that they had seen me, in an episode of this or that, and congratulate me. And, maybe my parents and my grandparents would go see a movie that I was in, but I couldn't see it, kind of thing. And Meet Dave was a really fun one because, that was a child's movie, but I was in it for, a couple seconds, and I was also wearing glasses, so I wasn't super recognizable. But Sonny With A Chance just totally changed everything. I think it was especially weird because when you're an adult on a television show and you meet other adults, they know that you're an actor and you're playing a role. However, when you're a child on a television show and you meet other children, they just say, "Oh, you're Zora. I know your mom." And it's, they're picturing the actress that plays your mom on the television show. And you're saying, no, that's not me. I'm an actor. I have a different name. And like, I'm not actually the right age of the show. Like, there's all these like details that they think they know about you. I remember when I booked the show and we filmed the pilot and we were just starting to get into filming season 1. Before it had aired, I attended a safety meeting with Gary Marsh, the head of Disney at the time, and he was prepping all the Disney Channel up and coming kids. I was sitting in the room next to Bradley Stephen Perry and Ryan Newman, and he was just giving us the lowdown on what kinds of security cameras to get and recommendations on, don't take a photo that you wouldn't want your grandparents seeing. Just like a bunch of advice, a bunch of tips, pretty much explaining to us that we're about to appear in everyone's living room every Sunday night at, this time. And we're going to start to feel like a part of the family to them. They are going to feel like they see us every week. They learn a little bit more about us every week. They, go on these journeys with us, these triumphs, these fails, and, they're going to laugh with us, cry with us. And then they're going to see us in person and they're going to feel this connection that is one-sided. And that is a frightening and strange thing that, the kids and the parents of all these Disney Channel stars just really had to adjust to. And that was probably the biggest takeaway from that period of my life, of just transitioning into the public eye at such a young age and really having to wrap my head around what it meant to play a character on TV and to play a character for people, for like the entertainment's sake, for other people.
So definitely a lot of pressure, just knowing that you're under like the Disney umbrella.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, mainly it just kind of felt a little bit like the death of Allisyn at the time. I all of a sudden, couldn't go to any parties or meet kids my age without them immediately having this preconceived notion of me or this concept of who they thought I was. And it was a weird transition, especially when at that age you're learning so much about yourself and you're still working on figuring yourself out. It's then weird to have a bunch of the world paying attention. I remember it was right around when Twitter was starting to become a thing as well, which I didn't understand what that concept was, like pre-Twitter, trying to explain what Twitter was to somebody. I was like, that sounds dangerous, like I don't want people to know where I am. But Twitter was a weird place for both cyberbullying and stalkers.
Yeah, that's scary. And let me ask you this, because I know you had also mentioned like the bullying part. So at that age, like, how do you deal with something like that? Like, what sort of mindset do you have to not let that affect you?
Yeah, well, I think it affected me in some ways. I think that I've always had a pretty strong sense of self, and I've always had a good support system around me. So it was pretty easy to ignore the bullying for the sake of bullying, of somebody just saying, you're stupid and ugly. I can be like, you're just upset that I'm on television, so it's fine. But then there's the stuff where people would make comments about my teeth being a little bit crooked, or even things that aren't necessarily meant to be a like hate comment, but just, I remember posting like a photo from an event, like a red carpet event, and I was wearing all black, and somebody commented on it being like, oh, I didn't know you were emo. And it's something where, just as a literal 12-year-old and 13-year-old, as you're figuring out your style, trying to figure out who you are, if you have people keep dropping these buzzwords and kind of these labels on you, it can very quickly shape your self identity and the way that you see yourself. So yeah, definitely, people being like, oh, she's so edgy and she's so dark, just because I wouldn't wear these like bright, colorful outfits in real life the same way that I would wear them on the Disney Channel. And so that was always a funny thing dealing with, because people on Twitter would say like, oh, I miss the way you used to dress, or when you liked rainbows and ponies. And I'm like, I never liked that. That was a wardrobe stylist like creating a character. That's how Zora dresses. That's not me. But yeah, just trying to navigate the balance between those while I was still finding my style was just really interesting. And I sometimes grieve the Allisyn that could have been without Twitter. Sometimes I would really love to have seen how I would have turned out if I hadn't had those influences. And I strongly encourage any parents of young tweens and teens, I don't think there's any need for social media. Like, I think that there are definitely career benefits to it, but that's for when you're an adult. I don't think it's a place for children.
I can't imagine what you went through during that time frame, but despite everything, obviously, that you might have gone through on social media back in the day, hopefully you had a good group of people to support you, and just people that you could go to. Hopefully the cast of Sonny With A Chance kind of did that for you, because you obviously had a great cast there with people on that show. You had Tiffany Thornton, you had Demi Lovato. I mean, so many people on that show. Obviously, everybody kind of going through their own thing, I'm sure, in their own way. But I would hope that you guys at least came together and at least spoke and kind of dealt with things as a group, hopefully. And I could be wrong. Maybe it wasn't like that, but I would hope that you at least had a good group of people behind you just to kind of offer you some advice, at least.
Yeah. So the cast was always really nice to me, but I was definitely treated during the first 2 seasons a little bit more like a younger sibling, despite the fact that, I had been working in this industry for a very long time and could probably relate to them on a lot more things than they realized. I was still the only one coming to set with a parent, and I was still the only one who didn't have a car and didn't drive. So that just created a separation between us where, we could have some great conversations, but at the end of the day, if they're going to, go do a cast dinner, they might not necessarily invite me, because that means that, oh, it's me and my dad coming along. And also I have school to get done. And it's just, that age gap, especially between, late teens and early 20s, and then an 11 or 12-year-old is just it's kind of large. And so I was a little bit alone for the first 2 seasons, but then when we started shooting So Random, I was a little bit older, so the age gap didn't feel as much. I was, learning to drive, and I had a cell phone, and that was when Audrey Whitby and Matthew Scott Montgomery, Shane Topp, Damian Haas, like a bunch of my, still best friends to this day joined the cast, and that kind of bridged the gap a little bit more. And they also were excited to be coming onto the show and saw me as one of the main cast members. So they hadn't really experienced that separation of, oh, Allisyn's the young one and these are all the older cast members. It kind of just felt like, oh my gosh, we're here and we're a part of the cast. And so I was able to sort of, meet them as myself and as a slightly, older person that they could identify with. And so, yeah, Matthew Scott Montgomery and I got very close, and we've stayed close. We used to burn each other's CDs. We related a lot over music. We definitely have very different tastes in music, but there is a really fun overlap there. And I'm also always just so hungry for new music that was a really fun relationship. He would also not only just burn me CDs, but he would doodle on them as well. And so I started doodling them on them too. And both Matthew Scott and I are artists and really appreciate each other's artwork. And yeah, it's always been a really fun relationship. He would give me old pairs of jeans and be like, do whatever you want with them. And I'd write all over them and draw all over them. And yeah, it's always been a fun, creative relationship.
You were also in the La La Land video.
Yeah, that was an interesting experience. It was the first like super produced music video that I had done because, like I said earlier, my dad is a composer and a musician. And so, we had shot some really, really low budget music videos together before. He had recruited me, with a just home video camera and stuff. He would kind of, map out a storyline and we would shoot it together. So I had always seen music videos as a little bit more of just like this kind of creative art piece that the artist goes off and makes themselves. So it was really interesting to be on the set of a music video where it wasn't being run by Demi. It was a production like house coming in and producing the video for them. So yeah, that definitely was really cool to see. And I've gotten even more into music videos since that time. And it really helped shape my idea of how to manage a set in that regard. I've used every single set experience that I've had to influence the way that I operate my own sets. And that was one of them. Demi has always been somebody that I've looked up to creatively and yeah, I remember, listening to Trainwreck as a kid and thinking that it was a really phenomenal song. I got really excited about that one, and seeing Demi get back into the heavier rock as well as taking their lyrics to a new place, a new, like, more personal place. That is phenomenal and so exciting to see. I'm so proud of them.
Allisyn, you voiced the character of Stormy in the Disney Junior series, Jake and the Neverland Pirates. What was it like being a part of that series and just getting a chance to voice your own character?
Yeah. Voiceover work is the absolute dream. Holy cow. If I could, restructure my life and my world to, just make a wish and it's all exactly the way I would like it, I would love to be a voiceover artist and have that be my primary source of income so that I can just work from home in my pajamas. My husband's got an awesome, recording setup here. Oh man, just like that would be so huge. I love the idea of being able to act and bring a character to life, but your face doesn't have to be shown, because it's a really nice way to separate yourself from every character, to be able to embody something fully, but then disconnect from it at the end of the day and then go have your own life outside of that, go to the grocery store, in your sweatpants and not get recognized or photographed.
And people do really well with that. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah,
that's like the dream gig, the ideal gig for sure.
That was a fun experience just for the sake of, it's really, really easy for me too. I was trained so hard by being a part of a show called Dive Ollie Dive. It was an Australian show about the environment, and there was these two little submarines. One of them was Ollie and I was the sidekick Beth. And it was, promoting taking care of the environment and the ocean and introducing kids to a lot of different fun ocean animals. But since it was an Australian show, their accents were really, really heavy. And that was a little bit distracting to an American audience. And so they were overdubbing it with, it was still English, of course, but it was, American accents. And so I was doing the voice of Beth. And that was a really interesting experience because I had to match exactly what they had already done because they were not reanimating it. So I had to find ways to time it out perfectly with the way that the mouth movements were already in place. And so I got very good at that. And we also had to make modifications to the script because there was just certain Australian terms that didn't translate, certain things that we just don't have here. So that was always a fun creative experience. Me and the writers and the producers sitting down and saying, okay, what's an American equivalent to like this? Of like, having to look it up and be like, what are they even talking about? Like, what's happening in Australia? Like, this sentence doesn't make any sense. And then having to think of what American phrase could fit within that many syllables and how I could, say it at the right speed to match the mouth, but also give it the right character emphasis to make the storyline make sense and make it not feel like an awkward line reading. So I did 52 episodes of that. And so any voiceover work for me now is just such a breeze. I'm like, oh, if you haven't animated this yet and I can do anything with it, like I'll nail it for you on the first time because that's just what I do. But then we can, play with it, have fun with it. And it's just, I feel very in my element in a recording studio.
It seems like you enjoy it. And
yeah.
And just hearing your voice on that series, the Jake and the Neverland Pirates, I can tell you have a very distinct voice. So in 2014, you developed a YouTube personality named Astrid Clover. And this was a web series that ran for like 7 years on YouTube, right? You had more than 350 episodes.
So coming off of Sonny With A Chance and So Random was the spin-off show, which was focused on sketch comedy. It was a sketch comedy show for kids, think SNL. And from that, I had been creating a lot of characters and started writing a lot of skits of my own. And Brian Robbins, who was a producer on Sonny With A Chance, went off to create Awesomeness TV and was working closely with Nickelodeon. So a lot of the Awesomeness TV stuff was ending up on Nickelodeon. And I started helping and working with them to develop content. And so myself and Audrey Whitby, one of my castmates from So Random, we created these little like music videos for them. So it was kind of like, silly rap songs and, quirky stuff, but as these characters, and we would sell them to them. And a couple of them ended up on Nickelodeon, which was really exciting for me as, a 15, 16-year-old and a budding, wanting to get into the behind the scenes element as well and establish myself as a writer. So with that motivation of knowing that I had a place that I could take a show to or take an idea to and go pitch it and potentially, make it into a reality, I was just creating a lot of different character ideas. And one of these characters ended up being Astrid Clover. She was this, antithesis of a hipster, especially for that era. It was the era of like penny boards and sweaters and ukuleles, and the whole catchphrase of Astrid Clover was like, you don't get it. Like, oh, we're so ahead of the curve that you need a map, we're so underground that you need a shovel, was kind of like the the joke of that character in that series. And I made 3 or so skits and I started putting them up on YouTube. I created its own YouTube channel because I wanted to kind of make it almost feel like Astrid Clover was a real person. I wanted her to have her own YouTube channel because that was part of the viewing experience to me of she's supposed to be this like vlogger, YouTuber, trying to make a name for herself on the internet, talking about how cool she is and that she, is ahead of all the trends before they happen. But then you, of course, cut to her footage and what she's actually doing, and it's not nearly as impressive as she's hyping it up to be. And I really started to fall in love with the character and fall in love with all the many different places that I could take her. And, just those first couple episodes, and then I just kept making them. Ideas just kept rolling in, and then it's a couple years later we hit our 50th episode. I had a party. We hit our 100th episode and I planned this big old crazy shoot, got on a different cameraman, and it just kept freaking going. And I definitely don't regret the amount of time that I dumped into it because it taught me so much. But it was something to where, because I stopped doing the show end of last year. And it was during the time in which I was, really trying to figure out how I wanted to manage my life work balance and, evaluating where I wanted to dump my time. And Astrid Clover was something where I was like, I love and appreciate everything that this character has done for me up until this point. However, I think my time with her, at least for right now, needs to be over because I have a lot of other things I want to do in my life. And Astrid's run a good 7 years, and I'm really, really proud of it. And anybody who wants to go back and watch the evolution of that show and the evolution of me as a writer and a producer and a creator, you can see the upgrades in my gear. You can see as my writing develops and I got to know my friends better as well. You can see my friend groups change. You can see family members on the show that are no longer with us. It's kind of this video diary of my life. And even though it's Astrid Clover, it's always paralleled my life. And if you go back and watch any episode, it's pretty reminiscent of some conversation I had during that week, or something that was happening globally, or something that I experienced the week before. And so it's a pretty good representation of what I was going through during those 7 years.
And for anybody interested in wanting to know more about Astrid Clover, where can they find the channel online on YouTube?
Yeah, you just type in Astrid Clover. It pops up. It's a YouTube channel. I've got, all the social medias and everything attached to it, but they're all just to promote the YouTube channel. So just go there and enjoy.
So interesting. So definitely check that out. For those that are listening and watching right now, make sure you guys go on YouTube and just look up Astrid Clover, because there's a lot of work that went into this whole series. And, obviously Allisyn did her thing within like that time frame, like for 7 years. She gave you guys Astrid Clover, so go and check that out.
Every single week. I never missed a week. And I mean, hey, it was for me. It wasn't for an audience, but yeah, I was not making any money on it. I just wanted to produce content with my friends and make something that I would enjoy watching and that I loved.
A couple years later, fast forward, Allisyn, you were cast in NBC's comedy series AP Bio. So you played this mousy high schooler named Heather Wilmore, and the role itself was so interesting because you're playing this completely different character that I've never seen, and I wasn't used to. So what was the mindset going into this show? What did you do to prepare to become this character, or just what was it like just being a part of the development of this character? If you probably had to kind of like incorporate some things of your own. Yeah,
so as an actor, I've always kind of been in a weird middle ground of a character actor and a leading lady, because those are very different types of roles, and my representation sends me out on both. So, if I'm auditioning for a film that takes place in high school, they don't really know whether to send me out for the cheerleader or for the nerd, because I can kind of do both. It's like I've done gymnastics and trapeze and I'm very athletic, but I also, can hunch my back and do a weird voice and get into the nerd thing. And there's just like quite a range. So that's been the most stressful thing about being in quarantine and having to self-tape for projects, because half of the information, or if not more, that I get from going into an audition is seeing the waiting room. I like to see the pool of people that they're pulling from. I like to see, oh, they're looking for character actors, or, oh, they're looking for models. Like it definitely influences the way that I go in there and perform it. And knowing, oh, they're just looking for people with a resume because I recognize, all these faces here. And for Heather, the character description was practically non-existent. It just said mousy glasses. That's literally all it said. And I didn't get a full script. I only got that one page, and it was just the catfish message. And so that's all I was working with. And I showed up to the audition, I put my hair in braids, look a little bit younger. Also, I find that pigtails and braids, like having kind of a staple hairstyle, helps you be recognizable, and especially in kind of these more nerdy characters. People like to kind of have those tropes. So I went with the braids, and I brought, I have a bin full of fake glasses. And for every audition, Dylan and I would pull out the fake glasses, we try them on, and we say, what do you think of this? Is this the character? We read the character description again and say, yeah. Or, oh, the frames are too thick on this one. I think you should go for this one. So I had already put in as much work as I could, but, I show up to the audition and I see that every person in the waiting room is such a character actor. Like, these people live and breathe like playing character actors on television and, you know, commercials, and I recognize a lot of their faces. And so I said, okay, like I gotta character myself up more. I have to make myself memorable because all these people seem very, very memorable. And also just thinking about the fact of it being high school, I remember asking myself, like, what are high schoolers like? And one of the things that I came up with was that high schoolers are always sweaty. I just remember coming home from school and just always being such a mess. And like, especially because going to auditions right after school, my dad would like struggle to try to like get me to clean myself up. I would have messy hair. I have my shirt unbuttoned and stained and everything, and I'd be barefoot. And he's like, we're about to walk into this audition for this national commercial, and you know, everybody else is there in their little matching, you know, Old Navy you know, jumper with the cherries on it, and their little hair like all done and nice and combed, and with their little matching clips. And like, my dad couldn't even get me to brush my hair, so I kind of channeled that for Heather in the audition. I went to the bathroom ahead of time and I just did a ridiculous amount of jumping jacks until I was just like out of breath and sweaty right before I got called in. So I just went in there like looking like I had just come from school, and I made the decision in the split second right before walking into the room to do a voice. And I had never tried the voice before with the script. I didn't really think about it ahead of time. I was just like, oh, they're going to want like a character-y voice. Let me just pull something out of, you know, my repertoire. And that happened to be the voice. And I stayed in character the whole audition. They freaking loved it. They brought me in. There was no callback. And yeah, I remember a good portion of the way into the first season, Mike O'Brien, the creator of the show, sat down with me during one of our lunches and was like, I was so surprised to find out you were a normal person. Like, I thought that you were just accidentally perfect for the character. And I was like, yeah, Mike, that's what I do. I'm an actor. Like, I've been doing this for 20 years. Like, let me act for you.
And, you know, AP Bio is currently streaming on Peacock. So you guys did about 4 seasons, I believe, right?
Yes, we did 4 seasons. The 4th one is definitely a huge departure from what the first 3 seasons were. And the 4th one has an interesting little side story of, I'm sure the writers were pulling inspiration from the real world, but Heather has a web series. and yeah, it's a web series called Janet Fist, Receptionist, and she's a crime fighting receptionist. And I had just put out on my YouTube channel a little bit before that this detective web show, like kind of Astrid Clover had sort of morphed into this, you know, chaotic character that I did a bunch of stuff with. But one of our episodes was this like fake detective style show, and I don't know if they watched it or if, you know, great minds think alike, but that was a really fun aspect of season 4 to tackle, because I had gotten a little bit tired of doing the same thing over and over again every week, you know, sitting in a desk, wearing the funny glasses, letting my mouth hang open, saying their little one-liner that might get cut from the final edit because, you know, it's a 32-page script and a 22-minute episode. So, you know, the one-liners are the easiest things to cut without ruining the storyline. But also the fact of just it being a literal desk job, that was something that I remember, I think halfway through season 2, I had this epiphany where I was like, wow, my life did not go the way I wanted it to, because even though I'm working and I'm grateful for it, I got into the entertainment industry because I didn't want a desk job. I wanted to be up and active and moving, and I didn't want to just sit behind a desk, whether that be in school or at a job. And I was like, I'm literally in a classroom sitting and working at a desk for hours on end, doing something so mind-numbingly like I don't know how else to put it other than easy, just because this is something I've been doing for my whole life. So it's like, it was really easy for me to just show up, do my couple lines, be my character, make people laugh, and go home. And when you're doing that for 17 hours and you only have 2 lines that day, and the rest of the time you're just sitting there staring out from behind these awful, awful glasses, those hurt my eyes so much. I was like, God, I this is not what I want to be doing with my life. But season 4, at least, you know, it freshened up a little bit. I was able to play this Janet Fist character, and that was a really fun, exciting, you know, character to play around with. I think that is the biggest like takeaway from the show, and kind of like what I think its strongest selling point was, is it was perfectly cast. That like the writers really created these like meaty, fun characters, and then they brought on just this brilliant team of comedians. And I really, really wish that the show had had more resources to have really been able to live up to its full potential, because there are those gem episodes that like, oh wow, this had something, and these comedians are brilliant, and the writing is freaking genius. Michael Bryan's one of the best, funniest writers I've ever known.
You know, while being busy, you managed to, you know, kind of meet other people as well that came into your life. Not only the people that you got to work with on set or whatever, for certain shows or for certain projects, but there was one person in particular that actually came into your life, and this was your husband, Dylan Riley Snyder. This is interesting because you guys obviously got married in 2019, but both of you met as teenagers on the Disney Channel, right? Is that when you were a part of So Random and he was part of Kicking It?
Yes, it was. It was. So yeah, both Dylan and I, we've felt like we've kind of lived parallel lives on opposite sides of the country up until the Disney Channel days, because that's when he moved out to Los Angeles to be on the channel. He grew up in Alabama and had gotten into community theater because his sister was into community theater, and he had started doing plays in Connecticut with a theater group there. And then when Hurricane Katrina hit, he, you know, the school system was down. They were going to be, you know, I think it was a situation of they were going to be starting up again in like 6 months, and the kids were going to have to like restart the grade. And it was a situation where his parents were like, I don't really want to put him through that. We should just do homeschooling. And they were like, oh, well, since we're doing homeschooling, we might as well try out, like, people keep telling him he would probably have a shot in New York. And so just like my parents, his parents were extremely supportive of his creative endeavors and wanted to give him that chance and those opportunities. So him and his mom moved out to New York and started auditioning, and he got reps, and he was on Disney's Tarzan as a kid. He was on the Broadway musical Tarzan, playing young Tarzan, and you know, doing all the trampoline jumps. And we still talk to this day about how that probably screwed up his back, spending all of his critical, you know, prepubescent years, you know, hunched over and pretending to be a monkey. However, it was, you know, overall, again, good experience. But yeah, so in New York, Dylan put a tape together for Disney for the role of Milton on Disney's Kickin' It. And they wanted to fly him out, you know, because him and his mom were like, we can't, you know, afford to just, you know, fly out for an audition. And so Disney offered to fly him out. So they were very serious about him, and he booked it, and Disney helped pay for the move, which is huge and just, you know, a testament to how talented that guy really is. And yeah, I met him when they were shooting the pilot of Kickin' It. So I was out here working on, Sonny With A Chance. I believe we were on season 2 of Sonny With A Chance. I'm not sure if it was season 2 yet or season 3. But yeah, we were working on Hollywood Center Studios, and Dylan was working on the same lot, but at just a different soundstage. And I went over there because my manager was also representing Alex Jones, another cast member on Kickin' It. And so I went over there to say hi to Alex and introduce myself to all the new kids. And that was also the reason why I think it took place during season 2 of Sonny With A Chance, is because I remember being excited that there was other kids on the lot, because I didn't have other people my age on my show. And so when I showed up to work on Sonny With A Chance, it was work. I was showing up, you know, obviously I was friendly and friends with people there, but I was there to do my job. I was also there to do school, and then I would go home, and my relaxing time was at home. And also I had been plucked out of school, so I didn't really have that like social environment for school either. And so I just really didn't have peers my age. And going over to that Kickin' It set, all of a sudden there was a bunch of kids my age, and you know, they were able to share some of the things with me that, you know, you would pick up, you know, from neighbor kids or other schools. I remember the Kickin' It cast showing me what Omegle was. And it's like, that is just like an important part of every teenager's life, is just, you know, discovering those weird little things. And so it was really fun to just immerse myself in a friend group that like got me and was going through a lot of the same things that I was. And yeah, Dylan in particular, we both just really related over, you know, the years and years of industry experience, also the years of being perceived and looked at as a child because of our youthful face and because of these characters we portrayed. We both have also had a passion for cameras. He's a photographer and I'm a filmmaker. And, we just kept merging those two until we both, have so many overlapping, talents and abilities and, assets that we both contribute to this partnership. And it's, gosh, he's the best thing that happened to me in the entertainment industry. And for that, I will never, ever regret anything that's happened to me.
That's definitely love. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
You guys obviously, in a sense, kind of grew up together.
Yeah, it's still the growing up together of experiencing the same things at the same time. Now we're able to, share stories and relate on things. And even we both went through some really, really terrible relationships in our teenage years. Cause, we met when we were 13 and we both had crushes on each other, but you're 13 and you don't do anything about it. And so timing wise, just, I started dating people, he started dating people. It just, didn't really work out timing wise for us. But we started going on double dates with our other partners. And so Facebook always loves to remind me of that, of being like, hey, you remember this? And it's like us and our exes. But I think that was also an important part of our journey, is just coping with dating in Hollywood and the entertainment industry and the people. And just, yeah, it was a weird world to grow up in. And we learned a lot from dating some interesting individuals, and that helped us be even stronger. And yeah, it was a fun moment when we started dating, of just being like, oh, you can actually like the person you're with, and like just that best friend energy. Just being like, it doesn't have to be tumultuous and tormenting like all the Twilight books told me relationships and love were supposed to feel like. It can actually be fun, and you can just have like a good, solid person that genuinely cares about you and wants you to succeed. And, you can work together on your passion projects because you both have the same goals and dreams. And that's just, yeah, it's unparalleled.
So Allisyn, very cool to hear about how you met your husband, Dylan. And I know that eventually led to both of you just working together on several other things. You teamed up with Brian Morrison, as well as your husband, Dylan Snyder, and you guys created Watch the Footage Productions. Tell us more about how this whole thing came about. I know you basically like developed some films or some projects. I believe you had 4 films that received distribution with Fun Size Horror.
Yeah. Okay. So I've always grown up making home movies. That's just, I can't stop. I won't stop. Every weekend that, I was having friends over, instead of being like, oh, like what movies do you guys want to watch? Or like, what snacks do you guys want to have? I'm like, here's your script. Like, this is the wardrobe you need to bring. Like, if your mom can, drop you off and stay for an extra 10 minutes, I want her to play this character. And it's just like, I couldn't get out of producing mode. At the time, I didn't really know what a producer was, but that's what I was doing. And so Dylan and I, we've kind of taken that to a new level, especially with his gear. But Brian Morrison is somebody that I connected with at age 16, and we didn't start working together until later, once I had started dating Dylan. But Brian Morrison, I met him when I was 16 years old. I was speaking at a charity event out in Maryland for this group called Kids Are Heroes. And it was a really wonderful organization and event where they basically honor kids in the community for, helping out. And my speech was all about, hey, we may all be small, but we can do big things, and just, applauding everybody for every effort. And, no matter how big or small of a change, it's all, positive and, putting effort into their community. And while I was out there for this event, the neighbor of the event host was the Morrison family. And so it was Brian Morrison was my age, and we were both really into, making our own home movies. And his father was tasked with driving my dad and I around. He had just gotten like a nice new Mercedes. And so the event host, being his neighbor, was like, oh, like, Bob, will you drive Allisyn and her dad around? And so he was kind of my chauffeur for the week, and his daughter Kendall was singing the national anthem there at this event as well. And so, I was just spending a lot of time around them. And Brian was actually supposed to go to, I think there was some sort of like homecoming or dance or something that was happening that night. But since I was in town, and I was like, hey, you want to hang out? Like, blah, blah, blah. And so he like skipped that to hang out with me. And I remember Hurricane Sandy hit. and Hurricane Sandy delayed my flight. And so I actually ended up spending even more time with them. And Brian and I, he was showing me like how he was creating muzzle flashes, because that was something I had never gotten into, is the VFX element of filmmaking. And so he was teaching me how he was, going about creating the muzzle flashes, because it's like, I have prop guns too, but his home movies had that extra element of production value. And so I was like, wow, like this is so cool. Like, we got to make a movie together one day. And Bob Morrison, his father, is such a like business guy, and he's such a connector. He really likes finding good people and connecting them, and especially seeing like how much Brian and I really clicked. He followed up with me those couple of years later. So, Brian grew up, started going to school. He started going to the North Carolina School of the Arts for editing, and Bob reached out to me. And this was around when I, was dating Dylan. I was getting into, filming my Astrid Clover web series, starting to really like produce on a more full-time like level. Even if I wasn't really making money at it, I was still just, starting to shift over my lifestyle into that headspace. And so Bob reached out asking if he could fund a little something for Brian and I to make together. Just he said if you guys want to make that movie together, and I'm not sure if he pictured a feature film or a short film, but I definitely suggested short film, because I had been on a million sets that fall apart because people don't know what they're doing and they don't have the resources. And I was like, let's start really, really small. Let's take a small budget and make a small project. So our first project that we all did together as a group, me, Brian, and Dylan, we made this short film called Strangers. And following that, we were really happy with how it turned out. A lot that we learned. I had never experienced lighting something before. I had always just been pretty run and gun with the camera. And so I had like improperly scheduled the shoot, because I was like, oh yeah, we can be out of this location in 2 hours, no problem. An hour into signing all the actors in and the SAG paperwork, and we're just starting to set up lighting. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going so much slower than I thought it would. So that project taught me a lot. I'm really happy with how it turned out. And yeah, again, a lot I learned. And then when we were going to screen Strangers, I called up the Morrisons, was like, hey, I'd love to host a screening for it. And Bri, while you're out here, we might as well shoot another project. And it just became this cycle of, we would screen a project, shoot a project, and we just kept every summer. He would fly out, during his summer breaks, and we would just make content together. And each time they got a little bigger, a little better. Bob would put money in, and to take some of the stress off of him, I started doing Kickstarters as well. People, could see that, what we were doing was really growing, that we had a passion for it. And I'm so appreciative of the people who kicked in. Like I would not be here if it was not for how many people have helped me throughout my career, whether that means, people dedicating their time to acting in my projects for free, or, lending a hand behind camera for free, or, whether it meant putting actual funds into my projects. I've had so much help along the way to get here. And yeah, so we started doing, we did Ouija was the next one, which Matthew Scott Montgomery was in. That was the first time that I got to direct him on camera. Really, really special project that is on both Fun Size Horror on YouTube, and you can also see it on Alter, the channel Alter. And so that's Ouija, spelled Weeji. It's all about a demonic presence who can't spell. And then we did It's Just a Story, which was a short that took place at a girls' summer camp in the 70s. That's also on YouTube. You can check that out. And then we did Nasty Habits. That was the first one that we crowdfunded for. And the production value of that one was crazy, because it was our first time working with a cinema camera, which was beautiful. And I'm so happy with how it looks. However, we realized that the max operating temperature of our camera was 105. And it was 115 degrees in the desert where we were filming. So we learned a lot about our gear on that shoot, and a lot of the technical challenges of shooting in a moving vehicle in the middle of the desert. So, first project, I learned a lot about the really basic stuff. And then Nasty Habits was really when our production company and us as a team started to kind of really get into our stride of, okay, now we have the resources, and now we're actually encountering real like hurdles and obstacles that we didn't nobody could have planned for. Like our truck got stuck in the sand, we got flat tires, like somebody hit our trailer on the way into set one day, and the camera turning off. It was a lot of challenges, but yeah, we've just kept growing, and we've kept making bigger and better projects. And after Nasty Habits, I was like, I do not want to work in the desert. That was so hot and so like stressful and difficult, losing your sunlight. And so the next production that we did was Room 566, which we shot entirely in a soundstage. So you get that air conditioning, you get that control of the lighting, and we prepared the team ahead of filming Room 566 because we had brought on a couple extra, crew members for that. We prepared them ahead of time saying, hey, the walls might be falling in, the whole set might be on fire. You got to stay calm, like stay professional. We're just going to keep pushing forward and make this shoot happen. And we prepared them for the absolute worst. And it went so well. They were probably like, I don't know what you're talking about. Set environments are a dream. Like everybody's super chill and easy to work with, no problems. And we're like, wow, yeah, yeah. When you have budget and you have a sound stage and some AC, it's pretty wonderful how many problems you don't encounter. But yeah, it was really after Room 566 that we realized that we're ready to tackle features. Because Bob, between every project, would say, all right, we making a full movie now? And I'd say, no, Bob, we still gotta, practice. And, with both the experience as well as, learning about film festivals, that was quite a learning curve of, understanding which festivals to submit to and the timing in which to submit to festivals and, attending these. And it's really been such a learning experience for all of us. But we're finally at a point where we feel we've learned everything we can from shorts, and now we're delving into movies. And we just shot Howdy Neighbor earlier this year, and now we're gearing up for our second project. And I couldn't be more excited.
And it's so cool to see all this because, just recently you held a movie screening back in August. And I want to mention the screening because you actually invited me to this screening. And I went out there and I actually got a chance to basically watch these projects, witness them firsthand. I did watch Ouija. I also loved Room 566. And we also got a chance to watch Don't Turn Off the Ghost Light, which I very much enjoyed. So very cool to see that these projects were also projects that you got to work on with Matthew Scott Montgomery. And while I was at the screening, you guys did show a teaser of what's to come. And Howdy Neighbor was that teaser. So let's talk about Howdy Neighbor, because this is a project that Matthew had talked about on my show a couple months back. So I want to hear your perspective on that whole project and how that whole thing came about.
We've wrapped principal photography and we're deep in post-production. A lot of that film is in post-production. It's pretty VFX heavy because it takes place on social media and on phones. And so there's a lot of scenes that instead of, two actors conveying dialogue to each other, it is just text messages popping up onto a screen, which is how we're all used to communicating, but it hasn't been explored in film as much. And, Basiloff's, they make, they made Unfriended and Searching. And those are both films that we pulled inspiration from, of that screen lifestyle. I think it's a really fun way to tell a story, especially in this day and age, and especially with the content of this film. Howdy Neighbor is a movie about this child actor who grows up and wants to pretty much put his past away and move forward with his life and his acting career. He wants to do serious work, be taken seriously as a dramatic actor. And there's this children's television show that keeps popping back up into his life and keeps kind of haunting him. And the show is coming back on a streaming service, and he has to start promoting it. And so it's kind of about that social media world of him trying to figure out how to interact with his fans and how to kind of step back into this world that he's sort of tried to separate himself from, and just kind of showing that stress of having to be a personality on the internet and be really careful about what you say and what information you let out. There's a scene where he's walking through the hallway of his apartment, and it's followed by a scene where he's speaking with his manager, and his manager is saying, hey, you should do, your lives when you're inside your house in a controlled environment so crazies don't find out where you live. And it's so real. And the elements of the script are just so specific to all of our actual experiences. And we stacked the cast with, former Disney and Nickelodeon actors, and even behind the camera as well. Pretty much the entirety of the team behind the camera is myself, Dylan, and our buddy Joey Luthman, he met Dylan while they were both on Kicking It together. Joey's guest starred on, pretty much everything under the sun. He's got a fantastic resume, and we've worked with him a really long time, and he, made that transition with us to behind the camera work as well. But yeah, it's like you've got a lot of young Hollywood perspectives, a lot of people who have grown up here and have seen the benefits of it and also the horrors and the dangers of it. And, there's this weird situation where we don't want to talk about how hard it was because it makes us sound ungrateful. And we know how truly, truly privileged we were to be, have these experiences and these opportunities and to be on television and portray these characters. However, I had to move in the middle of the night because a man moved across the country to track me down because he thought he was my guardian angel. And it's like, that's crazy for a young child to have to deal with. And we all have these stories. And it was this like kind of cathartic experience to be making this movie because it is a comedy. It is a comedy. It's a romance. It's a queer millennial movie where it's really fun. And so many of the scenes were so fun to shoot. But then there's this like dark undertone of like this story that we've all lived. Like, oh, there's people who just don't understand boundaries. And there's people who think they're so much closer to you than they are. And people who, cross the line by, finding your address, tracking you down. It's really scary. And I really just wanted to show that from the first person perspective of you are Benjamin when you watch the movie. You are Matthew Scott's character, Benjamin. You look at his phone screen as if you were him. You see him typing out his text messages. You see him recording these voice memos. You see him logging into his Instagram. I just really wanted to put people in that first person perspective of what it would be like if a super fan moved into your building. Because there are some funny elements to that. And there's also some really, really nightmarish stuff.
I'm so excited to hear about everything going on with you guys. And again, I enjoyed all the projects that you guys have been working on. So with that being said, Allisyn, because, you got your hands in so many other things, what else are you currently working on at the moment?
Yeah. So basically, Howdy Neighbor came together within the past 2 years. It was a quarantine project. During, 2020, Matthew Scott and I, we wanted to keep each other accountable as creatives. And so we started, collaborating and working together writing wise, just kind of each having our own scripts that we would bounce, off of the other person to get that alternate perspective. It was a really difficult time for a lot of us to create and stay, active in that world. So he was a huge help to me, and I we worked really well together. But Howdy Neighbor was something that he had written with the possibility of maybe having to shoot it during quarantine. So it's very minimalistic, pretty much every scene is a single actor in a bedroom, and that's it. And there's definitely those scenes that get a little bit more up on your feet and a little bit more intense, but it was a very controlled film, a very controlled and budget and like friendly environment. It was the kind of film where it was really, really budget friendly, and it was really easy to put it together in a short time frame. And so it was something that we were able to bring together a lot quicker than most productions would take. And I know that because I have another film that I've been working on for over 4 years, and that's the one that we're gearing up to shoot at the end of this year, which, holy cow, being able to say that, knowing that it's coming up on the docket this year, and that I've been on the phone all morning, having different production meetings, speaking with our production designer, and, her asking me questions about, we're going to need the dimensions of the warehouse, if you have the blueprints, because she's building out our sets for it, and just being able to like really get my hands dirty on answering a lot of these technical questions and, seeing the budget, finalizing things. It's so nice to see that it's like, oh, wow, this is really coming together, because for the past 4 years, it's just been rewrite after rewrite, and, phone calls with actors, trying to get them excited about the project and test out their availability. But now it's really all coming together. And that is a project that I am so, so excited to share. Because again, that is like something I've been working on for so long, and it's my first feature that I've written that will be being made into a movie, and it is my blood, sweat, and tears. It's my baby. People started asking Dylan and I after we got married, like, if we were planning on having children, and I was like, we have a child, and her name is Watch the Footage, and this movie, this is our baby, and it's something that Dylan's going to be directing, and I wrote it, and we're both producers on it. And just follow us at Watch the Footage. We'll be able to share more about it soon, but it's going to be a fun time. It's all based on me, real experiences. It's a dark film.
Incredible. Allisyn, you are definitely somebody. Again, like I mentioned earlier in the show, you're somebody who really embodies what we do on this show. You're constantly hustling, constantly on your grind, regardless of whatever situation you're in, whether it was a pandemic, just kind of like preventing you from finishing up a project or whatever it was, you never gave up. And because this is the Grizzly Podcast, again, this is a show about motivating and inspiring others to get on their Grizzly as well. What would you say to these people that are actually out there trying to pursue a goal or following their dreams? If you could offer them any advice, what would you say to these people?
Yes, it's all about the team that you build. You can only be as successful as the team that you build, and picking your friends in this industry or any industry is just so important. Finding people who want to lift you up and support you and help you, and because they're all going places too, and you can help and support them, and just finding people where it's like that's mutual, and they're not coming to you for alternative reasons or just to get a piece of the pie. Everybody's on their own journey, and success is going to come in different ways and at different paces, and that's totally fine. To maybe have certain successes that your friend group doesn't necessarily have yet, or vice versa, to, be able to celebrate successes of your friends and your team that, maybe haven't reached you yet. That's all good. But just, finding people who genuinely want to be your friend and genuinely want to be around you. That's my advice. If this is what you love, you're not going to have fun with it or love it if you're doing it with terrible, terrible people.
Very true. So, as Allisyn mentioned, make sure you guys gather a group of people that are supportive of you and are kind of like-minded in a sense, because they want to see you succeed, and not somebody that's just there just to reap the benefits. You know what I'm saying? So definitely align yourself with people that are going to help you out in the long run too, and not just trying to gain something for themselves.
Yeah, find people who have the same dreams and the same passion. It's like that was a big thing with my web series. If I would recruit people who enjoyed acting and they enjoyed kind of that skit, crazy like comedy stuff, who wanted to just hey, I'm not doing anything today. Sure, I'd love to come be in an episode. Like I always try to reiterate constantly, being like, hey, if you don't want to be here, if you don't want to do this, like, I don't want you here either. Like, I only want people who are having fun and who are doing this for the right reasons, not to just, get on my good side, or not to just, they have trouble saying no or anything. It's like, I want people who are having fun, because that makes it fun for everybody.
It was such a pleasure having you on the show. You definitely talked about so many things that you've done in your career and things that you're continuing to do even now. I'm so proud of your success and looking forward to everything coming up. So I'm pretty sure everybody else listening and watching the show right now, they definitely want to know more about what's going on and what will happen in the future. So for anybody listening and watching this episode right now, if they want to connect with you and just basically learn more information about Howdy Neighbor, or, your production company, or any other projects you got coming up, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, so my Instagram, Twitter, all across the board, my handle is always Allisyn. My name is spelled a little funny. It's Allisyn. So yeah, pretty much if you type in that spelling of my name, you'll find me all across the board. So yeah, I cursed my parents for misspelling my name as a kid, but now it allowed me to be able to change my last name when I got married, and people can still find me. So it's all for the best.
It works out. It's all good. So yeah. So make sure you guys connect with her on social media. She's on Instagram, Twitter, basically any social media platform that you can think of. But again, make sure you guys connect with her and just keep up with everything going on in her career. And on top of that, continue to do what you do. Don't ever change. Be the amazing person that you are. Stay on your Grizzly.
I will.
We'll see you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait.
Get it, pop. Let's get it.
Yo, that's what I'm talking about.
Don't miss a thing. Subscribe to the Grizzly Podcast YouTube channel to access full episodes, video clips, and more on YouTube. The most authentic podcast is online at grizzlypodcast.com and on all major podcast platforms. Guest appearances and real conversations that will push you to hustle. The Grizzly Podcast is now streaming.
Hi, and welcome to Trademark Expediters. Whether you need a trademark or copyright, we can help make the process easy and affordable. Protect your company name, logo, or slogan with the trademark. Protect your songs, books, photographs, and other creative works with a copyright. Complete our easy online questionnaire in 15 minutes or less. Clear pricing, no hidden fees. 100% satisfaction guaranteed. Get started today. Learn more at trademarkexpediters.com or call one of our friendly specialists at 1-800-510-1082. Affordable, easy, expedited service. Trademark Expediters.
Yo, turn it up.
Hard work, dedication, and progress. Stay on your Grizzly.
Yeah.
Thanks for checking out another Grizzly Podcast episode. We'll see you next time.